Hi, everyone. How are you? This is Sonia Sukar-Foray. Thank you so much for joining my session here at the Florida Climate Week, hosted by Bolo Foundation. I'm super excited to join virtually. I know there's people in person also meeting. I have attended in the past the Climate Correction Conference in Orlando. Hopefully, I'll be able to participate again in the future. Just want to thank Bolo Foundation for everything this organization has been doing to support organizations, research, development. We're very thankful. So thank you to Thais and David Vogel for all that you're doing. Thank you to the staff, Nicole, Wendy. There's an incredible team that is putting all of these conferences together and supporting projects through grants. And thank you again. I hosted a podcast just last week with the climate correction. So if you even want to dive in further into the bond, you can listen to that with Shannon that I hosted alongside the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Miami. But just to dive into 3 areas of focus, obviously we're going to talk about the bond, the history, how that even came to be, the current structure of the bond committee and how we're formed, how we meet. We're going to talk about a little bit of the challenges that the city has faced. I think that's really important to recognize where we've had to correct our own mistakes as a city, and where we're at now with the remaining funds in place. We're going to talk a little bit about just opportunities and innovation and how the bond is basically incorporating, new types of designs, new types of professions that are able to bid on this type of work, to incorporate, unique solutions to address climate challenges. And then sort of lastly, getting into the importance of civic engagement and participation. So I actually serve as a volunteer as the chair of this committee, which I've enjoyed, and it's been a wonderful experience. And I want to encourage others to also think about how they can serve in different capacities, whether you run for office or whether you serve in different boards. I also serve as an advisory board member to the Maurice Ferre Institute for Civic Leadership. This is at Florida International University. It's housed within the Green School of Public Affairs. And we started this institute in 2021 in honor of my late grandfather's legacy, Maurice Ferre, who served as the mayor of Miami during the 1970s and 80s, later becoming a commissioner, and who really just gave a very long life of public service. And I think it's important for the next generation to really think about, how they can best serve their community through elected office or joining committees and boards through volunteer capacity or joining nonprofits. So I'll talk a little bit about the Institute, but, the bond really began with civic participation and outreach. In 2017, there was a major hurricane and storm that impacted the state of Florida. For those that recall, Hurricane Irma was a catastrophic hurricane, Category 5, that impacted the state. At the time, it wasn't really sure where the landfall was going to occur, but the city of Miami actually was impacted by a lot of those hurricane force conditions. It was really a Category 1 when it hit the city of Miami, and it was very dramatic, I think, for residents to see, what kind of damage could happen from a Category 1. There was almost 4 feet of flooding in parts of Miami, especially in our financial district area. So for those that don't know Miami, I would imagine a lot of people on the call understand Miami is a city within Miami-Dade County. The population is roughly 500,000 people. Miami-Dade County is roughly 3 million people. The city of Miami is the second largest city in the state after Jacksonville, but it certainly has a serious, extensive coastline, roughly 88 miles of coast, whether it's on the bay or on the river. But again, that moment really kind of fast-tracked the need for the city to take things more seriously and to begin to invest in preparing for future storms. So that was in August. By November 2017, the mayor at the time, Tomás Regalado, decided that it was time for the city to really think about putting funding towards these projects and investments, capital projects. So these are capital projects that have to be spent. And by 2017, this was put on the ballot, requesting the city of Miami to essentially borrow money. So a general obligation bond is a municipal bond that's put on the market, and the city is slowly borrowing that money, putting the investments in, and they have, unlimited time to do that. Obviously, you want to do that when the city's in a good rating, or has a good rating, is in a good place to borrow that money and to put it to market. And so by 2017, the electorate essentially agreed to this bond. So this was $400 million. The condition was that the money would be spent across 5 different buckets. So I'm going to share some of my screen here so everybody can see, which I encourage those that have the capacity, either now or in the future, to look at this website to learn even more about the bond. Let me share my screen. So if you can see this is on the City of Miami's website. And so, the real vision and focus was for the bond to address certainly flooding. That's primary focus, but to do this in a way that you're thinking about safety and wellness, quality of life, equity, right? So distributing this across multiple areas and communities. There's 5 districts in the city. Hopefully seeing this economic return, right? That there's an investment that the city's making on major projects that can then benefit through job opportunities, helping to protect the infrastructure, whether they're, personal or private businesses, right? We're all trying to protect where we live and work, and then essentially modernizing the city, right? So we're helping it get to the next, to advance it and prepare for what's to come. We're seeing these events frequently happening, whether they're hurricanes or extreme heat events, and sometimes we get a foresight of this when there's king tide events that happen at the end of the year. And this is when, the full moon takes place, and essentially the water will rise up for a few days and, back and forth through the ebb and flow of the full moon. But the tides give us a snapshot of what's to happen. And so, in 2017, we sort of saw this snapshot, and we thought, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? And there have been other storms since then that continue to kind of light the fire and trying to put these projects in as fast as possible. But obviously we're trying to do this, the city is trying to do this efficiently and effectively. And so some of that also includes, the need to understand the existing landscape. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, the 2 plans that have been put in place to help the city in guiding these investments. So as you can tell here, there were 5 different fund allocations. These are roughly buckets. $23 million towards roadway improvements, right? Upgrading existing roadway systems. This is really both car-centric, bicycle lanes, different forms of mobility, but most of the major transportation systems are operated by the county. There is a trolley system, but essentially it uses the roadways of the city. So $78 million for parks and cultural facilities. That's a huge bucket, an opportunity to think about how parks can be innovative, and also protecting and restoring our cultural facilities. $7 million towards public safety, thinking about our fire departments and their operational buildings. Sea level rise mitigation and flood prevention, roughly $192 million to be invested to deal with that. And then affordable housing, which is roughly $100 million of the bond dedicated. And that has obviously been prioritized as an area that the city has really focused on. We see the changes and impacts across the city, the unaffordability of Miami and the state in throughout parts of different urban areas. And so, the affordable housing funding is an important area that the city has to address in order for all of this to kind of make sense, right? People have to be able to live here, afford to live here. But essentially everything is tied in, connected, and each of those buckets can be designed and built through projects that improve and advance the city in protecting and fortifying itself for future storm events, extreme heat events. Let me see here. So I think what's really important is that one of the, we started spending money or allocating money very quickly. And again, this is the City of Miami Commission that holds the power and authority to grant funds. We as a committee oversee the progress of the funds, how they're being spent, if they're being spent on time. We can dive into the designs of the projects and really understand how the city is thinking of the design and how they're planning to build it. We can bring a lot of presenters as well to present their solutions, or different professionals that are just able to kind of talk about what they've done in other parts of the state or other parts of the country and how they could potentially apply for these projects through contracts. But if you can see here, there's really one plan here that I want to identify, which is the Stormwater Master Plan. So at the time, the city realized that it needed to really collect and understand data and information related to its existing urban footprint, its topography, where flooding was occurring, where it could potentially occur in the future, right? So through like modeling and projections, you can better understand, a 100-year flood event, or where, these flood events are happening. There's even a lot of citizen science involvement. So when, in the case of king tide events, students, the citizenry of the city could come out and capture water, send this information to the city, recognizing like, oh, this street is flooding, or, potentially this one's flooding even more. I mean, there's just a lot of participation that citizens can do and helping to provide data. But this was clearly a plan that, contractors were hired, a firm came in and developed a plan. So if you can, for those that are interested, you can go really in depth here on the importance of the plan in guiding the city. And this is where a lot of the funding, especially for that $192 million towards flood mitigation, but also for roadways. Some of the roadways in more flood prone areas were paused on construction until we could gather more information from this plan to help us think about ways that we could design roads with bioswales in mind, to think about capturing that water. So again, you can dive into this. I think it's really important for people just to understand, what cities have to do. Sometimes these processes take time, but at least the plan was finalized in 2021. There was a lot of community participation, response. We had workshops so that people, both in the city, staff members, but also the public, could come and give their feedback on the proposed projects. And this is still continuing. The city actually allocated another $91 million of that $400 million about 2 weeks ago. And so those are projects across the 5 districts. There actually, some are projects or areas that know they need flood mitigation. And this is where, the opportunity to think through unique designs and bring in new firms to be able to bid on these type of projects with innovative ideas on how to capture stormwater. So the Stormwater Master Plan, again, was finalized. Let me stop the share here for 1 minute. Let's see. One of the important things that we started seeing as well is that despite the need to try and get a lot of the flood water off of the roads during major storm events, whether they're hurricanes or honestly just bad storms, the desire to just get the water off the roads is always eminent. Everybody just wants to get the water off, which is important, right? People need to be able to commute, walk, get to their place of work, get home, get out of their homes. But sometimes you have to pause and think about, how you're capturing that water. Is it a matter of quickly just pumping it out into the rivers, into the bays, or are there ways that we can basically capture that water and slowly filter it in a way that we can get some of those pollutants out in advance of the water, polluting our bays? And so there has been a lot of discussion about that. Some pump stations have that capacity, but there's also unique ways where nature-based infrastructure or nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, another way of talking about incorporating whether wetlands or mangroves to help us capture stormwater, filter it, or in some cases with mangroves, which there has been more and more research and understanding of how they can better protect or fortify cities in buffering against impacts from storms. And this has been seen after major hurricane events. Hurricane Sandy, which was in New York and New Jersey, really damaged parts of the city and, the outer parts of the island, the barrier islands and Long Island. And essentially they came to find that these wetlands were able to buffer and protect the city almost in like $650 million worth of damage, protecting, the assets, property damage. I think it was 138 million alone in the city of New York that was saved that money by having wetland systems. And, there's only about 2 miles of wetlands across the city of New York. So, not even a huge amount of these natural systems can do serious wonders in protecting, especially in those first early forces from the wind coming in. So, more and more information is getting out on the importance of whether protecting natural systems that are already in place or adding them into the way that cities are fortifying their cities and their towns, and whether they're very natural systems or they're hybrid systems, which can act as green and gray infrastructure coming together. Some more traditional seawalls, but incorporating living seawalls where, you're including different natural systems in the way that these systems can protect, while also being very, providing, ecosystem services. So, there's benefits to the marine biology around these places. I mean, the Bay is very much alive. So more and more of that is coming to play, and more people want that. I think beyond the fact that you have to see an event to take place to see the impacts before and after, sometimes people just recognize that there's enough data information from other cities that are also having major storm events to then advocate for these type of systems. Okay, so then, moving into the way that that the city is thinking through our affordable housing, which is a huge area of focus that I mentioned to help address the challenges many residents are facing. On the website, you can also go back and see there's a home ownership program, preservation program, basically trying to keep residents where they live, but also weatherizing and hardening their homes with new windows, new roof replacements. There's a lot that can be done to existing buildings, whether single family homes or apartment condominium buildings. So significant funding has gone into that, in addition to building brand new construction to help alleviate, the crisis of affordable housing. Certainly a lot of those projects are also happening near transit oriented locations, our metro rail system. So I think that's also a fantastic way to help people, get to work with alternative modes of transportation. So there's obviously a continued interest on keeping affordable housing at the forefront and thinking essentially about how to be innovative on these new construction projects. And I would imagine that the city continues to request allocated funds of that 100 million that has not all been spent. Part of the draw in all of this is to help the city get additional matching funds. So of the $400 million, right, the city basically identified almost $5 billion from the stormwater master plan that need to be invested to really help deal with flooding, which is significant. But the bond is a first step that I think can then, the city can then request federal, state dollars, matching dollars, and they've been pretty significant, almost $55 million in matching funds so far, which is fantastic. I think a lot of that is also coming through these designs that are incorporating nature-based solutions, and thinking about equity as well, and having a lot of community engagement on these projects. And I think that will continue, because again, if you're trying to get to $5 billion in investments, 400 million is just a percentage of that. Another thing that's helping, I think, strengthen this bond and the remaining funds. So of the 400 million, 91 million was just allocated in the last 2 weeks to deal with flooding. Affordable housing has had a couple buckets, but roughly around half of the money has been allocated. So essentially another 200 million still needs to be spent on projects. The city is trying to fast track some of these projects. There are pilot projects in the works. We're trying to see how they are addressing flooding, but the idea here is that, the next round of projects continue to be approved. Some of the challenges have been just, obviously COVID was a huge setback. Some of it has been like strictly leadership and the desire to make sure that the city feels empowered to really, the staffing empowered to do these projects with the support of the commission. The commission essentially has the power. But myself, our committee, there's also other resilience committees that are advocating for these projects to go, to include these innovative designs, whether it's nature-based, energy efficiency projects. There's definitely a desire to really kind of like get that next $200 million moving fast, right? Because we recognize that these disasters, natural disasters, really man-made, are happening a lot more frequently. And they're not just storm events, there's extreme heat. We just faced a very, very hot summer. And how can we incorporate, solutions to help people right now as soon as possible, prepare for the next summer? So, there's obviously a need to push this. We meet quarterly. The commission meets every 2 weeks. So we're constantly trying to advocate for the participation of the public, whether it's at our committee meetings or the city commission meetings, to continue to say, continue to push for these projects to move forward. But again, something that I think is strengthening the bond, or that will strengthen the bond, is a procurement resilience checklist that has been developed and will be going before the city commission in the coming weeks. This resilience checklist, procurement resilience checklist, is really a way for, is really allowing new professions, diversity of professions, to be in the mix of opportunities during procurement. So thinking of ways, if we're going to talk about nature-based solutions as an opportunity, sometimes you need to have the professionals that understand that best. Landscape architects, for example, different biologists that understand wetland systems, that can be part of these firms that are actually bidding on the work. Traditionally, a lot of the work will go to, civil engineers. And, I think firms are recognizing the desire to have more diversity on their teams as they bid this work out. So the procurement checklist will help with that. And it'll actually add resilient focused criteria, so that language is part of the procurement process, part of the bid contract language. So people really understand, that these firms need to be able to showcase and present and get points, however they go through these processes to get their contracts, to bid on them with, to be competitive, is that they have to show that they have experience dealing with extreme heat in cities, or flooding, or storm surge, and how to best present that when they are bidding on these, pretty significant capital projects. And so just to dive a little bit into the type of projects, I'm going to share my screen one more time here, because I think it's important to realize, how many projects are taking place. So again, of the different buckets, the bond, including parks, roads, facilities, are taking place. These projects are happening all across the city. Obviously, we're focusing heavily on the waterfront, given, what we're seeing with flooding and what we're projecting in the future. And so there's some serious projects on the bay. There's quite a few on the Miami River here that are taking place that are incorporating multiple systems, whether it's capturing stormwater directly onto the park or adding mangroves or hybrid seawall systems. Some of this is still preparing and educating the commission on these benefits. So some of them aren't as, they're not going as fast as we wanted, but the public is also helping, and organizations have played a huge role, locally based organizations, in helping to sit down with commissioners and explaining these benefits to the community and enhancing parks for people and for nature. So that has been really fantastic. There's also a lot of innovation coming out of startup companies based in Miami that are designing these systems, like, for instance, the living seawalls. There's a company out of Miami Beach called Kind Designs. Really impressive what they're doing. They're getting a lot of venture capital to expand their living seawalls that are designed through 3D systems. And those are, projects, those are solutions that can be put in. Some of them require a pilot phase, and then eventually they're able to contract or bid on these contracts for additional, work needed to fortify our waterways and our bay coastline. So, I think that's just important to say that this also provides, opportunities. Climate innovation is a way where people can benefit. Job hiring locally, and more of that's obviously coming out. Universities play a really large role with that. Florida International University is leading on that, the University of Miami and the Rosenstiel School. So it's really important to note that this innovation can actually happen locally too, rather than sometimes importing all of these solutions from elsewhere. They're starting here in Florida, which is fantastic. Okay, so then just wrapping up here, I think I've shared a lot of information. Again, I encourage those to go on to the Miami's website. There is a lot of opportunity if you're either a city understanding how this was structured, if you're thinking of this, if you have a solution that could potentially help the city. I think there's a real draw for people to come and present their solutions or meet with the commission and, commissioners, and understand why they're doing this elsewhere and why it's working. I mean, I think that's the whole opportunity here as well. And then lastly, I really want to emphasize, the importance of civic engagement and participation. Again, I serve as a volunteer because I really care about how Miami is investing in its future. I'm able to vocalize my concerns, obviously, in this platform, which has been great. Even through challenges, I think sometimes you have to be able to say that you're willing to give your time and energy where you can to help guide the city, to be able to be that voice and advocate for these different types of solutions, to help them stay on track, to help also encourage. I think a lot of the times the city staff, is inundated with trying to meet deadlines and do this work. But it is, they are serving the public. And, the importance in general of serving your community, I think, is really important. I think it's necessary for today's day and age. I think part of the story is helping our youth think about, where they want to live. Obviously, university, when you're in university and you're a college student, you are thinking about your career. And so, the encouragement of public services as a way to get in and serve your community and also participate. And sometimes it's just a matter of just being engaged during elections, helping people register to vote. I think locally a lot can be done. We get very focused on the federal and state politics of what's happening, which is, important if you have the ability to go up to Tallahassee and DC, or to serve on different boards nationally, statewide. But for a lot of people, the local level is where your first entrance or your opportunity to use your time and energy in trying to make a difference. And so, I just want to leave this session, this important Florida Climate Week, in encouraging, especially our youth, which I've seen more and more action, whether they're showing up at City Hall or they're showing up to their capital in Tallahassee and demanding and requiring more action be taken on climate, to continue to push. It takes time. Some of these projects take, layers and moving through, but I think the more that our elected officials hear the needs, especially about the future, about their future, I think the more you're going to see cities and the state take a stronger role in this. And obviously, we're going to see more of these impacts and disasters happening. It's happening fast. So, the need to be civically engaged more frequently is also required. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I hope you've all learned from this session. You can also listen to the podcast that was done if you want to hear a little bit more about this work. My email is sukarfaray@gmail.com. You can reach out to me if you would like to learn more about this. If you have any solutions and innovation that can be presented to our committee or to the city, but definitely stay hopeful, positive. Thank you again to the Volo Foundation. And thank you to all the participants that are giving their time and talking and learning and building awareness. All right. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. You hungry?
Okay.